Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is Ekogitu KE podcast, and I am your host, Teresia Gitao. Today, we are joined by the program's manager of Catholic Youth Network for Environmental Sustainability in Africa, that is Mr. David Munene, who is going to be taking us through the role of the role of men in environment. And my question is, we normally say that women are mostly affected by climate change or any environmental issues more than men. Is it true? Or is the narrative engendering all this? Mr. David Munene.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening and good afternoon, good morning to everyone who's watching. Thank you for having me today.
And thank you for accepting to join us and to have this discussion. And the first thing that I want us to start with is, let us go back in time.
Yes.
And I want to know, how did the traditional man contribute to environment first and also environmental pollution?
Prior to engaging you on that question, I will begin by first of all issuing a disclaimer that I am going to speak from the African Traditional Society setup, specifically within the context of Kenya and in the Central region, and to the best of my understanding and recollection of what I have been told by my elders and what I have observed while growing up. Now, initially, the man was seen as the principal custodian of everything considered wealth within a family setup, within the village setup, and even in chiefdoms. If I recall correctly, what my elders have taught me is that the man was supposed to gather, but the woman was supposed to manage. And that is why it was very important that you get the right partner as a man while you're getting married. Now, the role of man in ensuring that there was stability, not only in his own family, in his own life, but also in the village and in the country, superseded anything else that would have caused havoc in the village. What I understand is that the man was responsible for making sure that the environment was taken care of, that it provided for when it was supposed to. I recall that there were sacred spaces that were set up, notwithstanding that mainly they were reserved for men and men who were considered of good repute and good standing in the society. Those men ensured that, for example, those shrines were not tampered with, they were not polluted, and they ensured that even in their homesteads, that the trees that were supposed to be there remained there. The man was responsible for making sure that the family was fed as well. In this way, the man would go out of his way to find enough wealth and enough food, or ways, avenues through which the woman could be able to get food enough. If it was hunting, if it was gathering, the man was responsible for that, but the woman was responsible for making sure that everything that has been provided for by the man is multiplied, number one. Secondly, it's taken care of, and thirdly, it passes on to the next generations.
And as I listen to you, I'd want to hear more, because what I hear is there is more about men taking part in environmental matters and also women. Like there was that equal division of taking care of the environment. But now we are in the modern world, and what I'm wondering is, has environment been engendered in that it affects women more than men, and doesn't the change affect us all? Or I would want to know, what is your take on this?
Yeah, so first of all, the African Traditional Society, and especially in the Kenyan context, is very gendered, I would say. It's very gender specific. Roles are divided. Labor is divided according to gender. And I cannot run from the fact that it is very patriarchal. And in some instances, sorry to say, the woman was treated or seen as second class, if you look at it from the contemporary society's perspective. However, if you engage those people that were there during those times, they will tell you that the woman was not necessarily second class. They actually at times were considered property, which is not acceptable at all. Because I cannot imagine, even from my Catholic faith, another human being considered property to somebody else, or being placed at the same pedestal or level with an animal like a cow. However, the role of the man and the woman in terms of what ownership translates to, the role of the man and woman in terms of fending for children especially, is, I think, the principal reason why we say that women and children are affected the most by climate change. Because even if you look at the statistics today, in as much as we have single fathers in the contemporary context now, we have more single mothers, I would think. So we will see that women tend to carry the burden of the family more than the fathers would.
I'd like to pick the conversation from where you left it off. And we know that in African societies, men are landowners.
Yes.
Mostly. And let's put it in the context of in the rural Kenya, men are still the landowners. And what I'm wondering is, how do we allow women into this conversation with such mindset of, number one, a woman is a property, and number two, a woman is below a man? And as you answer that, I'd like to hear maybe if you have like 3 action steps that we can use to implement this so that we can bring women to the table.
So, number one, there has to be systemic change and change in the systems. We have made quite some strides, even with the Sustainable Development Goals on issues gender. And I think we are progressing in a direction that's good, although there's still a lot that needs to be done to bring women to the decision-making tables. However, we must first of all break the bondage of women believing that they have to be second class, or there has to be a man so that then they can be able to do A, B, C, D. But I would like to point to borrow from politics. Having a position of leadership does not necessarily mean control. Sometimes it means control is with somebody else. And I think when I've been growing up, I have seen that the title deeds are written in the names of men. The men set up the fences and they say, that is my place. But when it comes to control, I find that women have got a higher level of control in terms of how land is used, how land is utilized, how far we are going to till this time around, what section is for zero grazing, for example, and what other section is for tethering, what we are going to leave untended for this period so that then the land could gain fertility. I see that there has been control. However, I cannot overlook the fact that men call out the shots in most of the cases, but the acceptance by women that only men can do that is usually, I think, the biggest pitfall in our gender progressive agenda of having women now take more control and influence how we are going to take care of the environment. So action steps, I would think of number one, women first of all having a change of mindset. They themselves changing the attitude towards property and land ownership, because land is a big deal. And if you borrow from the Holy Scriptures, that's the Bible, you will see that land belongs to God. All along, it's bequeathed to human beings for them to tend to it. And it's said as much in Leviticus and so on. But women have got to change that mindset and know that they are equal opportunity owners of the same land. Because we've also seen instances where tradition does not even allow, for example, a widow to take control of the land after the husband has passed on. And I would say that's shameful in the 21st century and needs to change for whatever cultural reasons we have. So women have got to change their mindset. Secondly, now, men have got to change their mindsets. That having your wife, having your spouse, having your partner, having your sister or having your aunt as a core owner of your land does not in any way demean or reduce your dignity as a man. If anything, I think it catapults you to a higher level. However, this cannot be done by men and women in separate tents. It has to be done with them together, so that then this mindset transformation comes from a point of cohesion and togetherness, a point of we want to proceed this way. I'll give an example of my grandfather, may he rest in peace, the father to my mother. Back then, I am told that girls did not have to be educated. And in fact, my own mother, there were village elders who came after she finished her class 7 back then, and sat for the certificate of primary education and excelled. They came and said, you don't have to take this woman to school because she'll be married off anyway. Now, here's the scenario. My grandfather was just a sawmill. He just had his big saw and had a partner and so on. But in him was something that told him, these are my children. I do not have a son, I do not have a daughter, I have children. 5 daughters and 2 sons, but they are all my children. And even when, I will not say the name of the man, because people listening to this global podcast might actually relate to them, but one specific man whose name I have in mind came to my grandfather one evening and said, you don't have to educate this woman, that's my mother, this girl. But my grandfather was adamant and said, in fact, if I were to count sons, this would be my firstborn son. So I'm going to educate her, and as fate would have it, my mom turned out to be the most educated in her school, in her family. And that thing has now transformed into generations that have come after, because I hear my cousins talk about how my mother was an inspiration to them for education and why they took on degrees and so on and so forth. So this mindset change cannot happen in separate camps. It has to be men and women together. Now, the third thing, it has now to be inculcated and ingrained in the people that are being brought up by men and women. It has now it has got to move to a stage where now the children that we are raising actually know that their sister is a child like they are. There is no ownership for child A and child B. Even right now, we are still living with the challenges of inheritance. My sisters will not inherit as much as I inherit, for example, because I'm a man. This has got to change, and it can only change if the men and women who are here today can infuse this progressive agenda of gender balance and gender equity and equitability to men and women progressively.
And just picking up from what you're saying, what I'm hearing is there's still a long way for us to go. And my question is it wrong to say that we are here because women are not at the table? That is the first question. And also the second thing would be, when we look at Africa,
yes,
are we sleepwalking into disaster because women are not at par with men at the table?
Well, it has been disastrous already that we have not had women on the table, because agenda about women has been passed on from a masculine perspective or a mindset. And in most instances, I do not understand what my daughter, what my sister, what my wife, what my aunt exactly thinks and how they would feel about what I think is right. Suppose you take a project, for example, speaking from a program's perspective, to a people who live in a dry area, and you think that the best thing they need there is a well for water, but then you dig the well and they don't fetch the water. It's because that was not the solution they were looking for. So in terms of progressiveness, we have remained behind, partially because women are not on the decision-making table. And for anyone who has lived, for example, with their mother, their aunt, or a woman of good standing around them, you will know that morals of the society are held quite strongly because there is a woman at the decision-making table. If your mother was a disciplinarian, then you know the discipline you have carries forth mainly because of your mom. And so women are change makers and they transform. Men hold the change together. So when the women transform the mindset of the people, the men will hold the change together. From where I come from, in central Kenya, our mindset is such that the man is designed to be the pillar of stability. But the stability and the transformation that comes from it is not a making necessarily of man. It's a making usually of women, and they run their ideas through men who then still make decisions largely. To bring women to the decision-making table is going to be a power struggle. I have to admit that.
Yes, because it's going to be changing like the status quo.
Yes, you're removing people from a comfort zone, something that they are used to.
Yes.
And now telling them discomfort is better. And by the way, when you're speaking to a man about that, it's about ego, it's about power. It's about taking away something that is of privilege from them. It's just like a child having candy and then you tell them, oh no, we are going to take away the candy because a watermelon is better. You're going to have a struggle.
Is it going to be, are we taking away, or are we are just opening it up so that we can share?
I'm speaking from a masculine perspective, very patriarchal.
Okay, okay.
Forgive me.
Uh-huh.
So, from a man's perspective, you're taking away. From a very patriarchal perspective, you're taking away. And the woman is gaining. I think even in social media, it's quite rampant, even in the elitist groups. You will see that there is this perception that if you share even your position or the roles that you're supposed to share, then you're usurping yourself. It's like you're taking away that control that you used to have. It's just like if you think now in terms of the political heat that we are experiencing right now. You tell, for example, the candidate or the top-notch presidential leader, why don't you forfeit some of your roles, not be seen too much, because actually your team can help you with that. Usually they will think, these guys are watering me down. And in fact, we've seen people trading accusations on the same. So it's not actually that women will be taking away anything from you. They'll actually be adding to what you already have as men. Unfortunately, the perception I'm saying there is now is that they are taking away. However, it also sits well on, I would like to comment on extremist feminism. If there is an opportunity for women to come on the decision-making table, I do not want to say that you can only come this far. But the approach to how far you want to go must also be in appreciation of the masculine gender. It cannot be that we're celebrating downfalls, our ups, because somebody is down. It has to be that we are celebrating our pursuit of equity and equitability with men without necessarily putting them down.
When I listen to you, what I'm hearing is more of, there's that element of fear. Now we are digressing.
Yes.
There's that element of fear because the moment we are saying we share, now the question is what next? Does it mean that we're going to lose it completely, or does it mean... So when I'm listening to you, that is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
There's that element of, so does it mean I lose it completely? What does this sharing mean? Will they come all the way too far, So I would say, in my perspective, when it comes to ego, it is more of there's fear behind it.
There's always fear when you're, even yourself are changing. There was fear when you were joining high school.
Oh, yes.
There was fear when you were joining campus. There was fear when you were joining your first job. There was fear when you came on radio first, the first time you looked at the camera, the first time somebody stood on stage. That fear is only created because the way we want to live is in a comfort zone.
True.
Even though we know very well that discomfort is going to cause growth, sometimes we are not really willing to take that. And I speak this to myself more than I'm speaking to our listeners and our viewers, because I know there are times I should have made some steps towards discomfort so that then I can grow. It's look at it this way. There's the phrase in English that the more the merrier. The more the merrier. The more we are at working towards the same goal of empowering, for example, women and men together, because even in some instances men do require a lot of empowerment, and sometimes it comes from women. We have to move from a point of it's a minus for a plus. That's a minus for the man and a plus for the woman. The reason why a lot of these plus and minuses are seen in the contemporary society, in my view, is because the way a plus is approached, it's approached in celebration of a minus. That we celebrate, they lost, we have gained. And the men lament, we have lost, they have gained. And that brings us to a situation of compromise and issues of, like, we don't know how to move from here.
As a modern man, there are those things, you're speaking more to yourself because there was elements of discomfort that still make you uncomfortable. And when you look at that, my question is, what I'm wondering is to get into that uncomfortable conversation of trying to see what is the role of the modern man to environmental pollution and degradation today, from your own perspective.
From my own perspective, the role is first of all to educate oneself. You have to bring yourself to a point where you understand environmental pollution. It doesn't have to be very advanced. and degradation, it doesn't have to be very complex or very scientific, but at the very least from the indigenous science perspective. That you must understand environmental pollution and degradation from your own context, because contexts define the extent to which people appreciate, for example, the issues of pollution and how it's affecting them, and issues of conservation. Why should we conserve? For example, if you go to the communities that are even in the central region around the Aberdares, for them, they will say that forests are more important to them. But if you come for forest and of course land. But if you come, for example, to the epicenter of central Kenya, you'll find that for them, we are conserving environment so that then we can reap more and be able to farm dairy cows and so on. So crop farming versus dairy farming, and we do not want drought. For some, it's because we want clean water. For some, it's because we are stressed with our pains are what define context. So educate yourself as a man, understand properly within context what is the pain in terms of environmental pollution and degradation in your area. Number two, you have to now, after educating yourself, you become very advanced. Now you have to come a bit low. How do you now disambiguate? How do you explain that which you understand very deeply into something that is palatable for a child? They say that, for example, in PhD, if you cannot explain your thesis to a 2-year-old or 3-year-old and they understand, you probably don't know what you're doing yourself. And if you have to use more than a paragraph to explain what environmental pollution is and degradation, probably you don't understand. So the lower you can go to the level, the better, because that means you can be able to impart knowledge to generations that are after you and impact their approach to environmental pollution and degradation. Finally, of course, you have to change your mindset and attitudes. And this comes also with an effect on lifestyles. For example, I like to give the example of myself. When I realized that, when I educated myself and became aware about the effects of plastic bottled water, plastics alone, then I thought about water stress and so on. I do not buy plastic bottled water for whatever reason. If we have to use it, for example, in Sinesa, then we request that we have one place where we can fetch all of us and people come with reusable or refillable water bottles. Nonetheless, I understand that in some contexts it's very difficult to be able to effect that. But once you have that change of attitudes and mindsets towards how you approach issues, the environment at the personal level, then those issues of the environment become very, very ingrained in how you even influence others and influence the direction that people are going to take. Finally, take action. You can't just educate yourself, lower yourself to the level of educating others, then change attitudes and mindsets, and then don't take action now to reverse the effects of environmental degradation and pollution.
Now, when I listen to you, I know there are those specific actions that... Because I understand we need to take actions and we need to be aware of what we are doing.
Yes.
But as we try to go back, we need to understand our actions. I know there are those things that men do specifically. When you look at women, when it comes to wigs, we are the biggest polluters. Synthetic wigs. When it comes to yogurt, we are the biggest buyers of yogurt. And yogurt come in
single-use plastics.
Exactly. So now I'm wondering, in your opinion, because you're representing men and they'll come after you when you say something that is wrong, I'm wondering which activities or what products do men use specifically and contribute to environmental pollution?
I will start with what men love the most, I think. Machines. When it comes to cars, men love cars, and I know this because I'm a man. So cars, and you can look even at small boys, look at them in your villages and see how early they start vrooming. As toddlers, when you're feeding them, I think that's when they start vrooming. And they bubble out the strawberry out the food, they raspberry the food out, sorry. So there is the issue of purchasing low quality products that end up in the streets. For example, your car bumper is hit in Nairobi, and we all know that driving in Nairobi sometimes can be a dangerous sport, although it can also be an adrenaline source. So you have your bumper, for example, broken, but then when you go to purchase your spares from Kirinyaga Road or from industrial area or wherever else you purchase them from, You are told there is this quality one that could last you 3, 4, 5 years, but there is this one that is a bit cheap but could last you a little bit a short time. And this trickles down even to things like wipers. There are wipers that go for as low as a pair is about 200 bob. For international listeners, that's less than $2. And there are wipers that go for about $10, $12. One of them, not two, but one. So men can transform their attitudes in terms of the power of purchase they have as well. So for machines, let's use quality stuff, and as much as we can, let's avoid, for example, the use of plastic. And secondly, I will go to party joints and so on. So when you go to your favorite place, let's say on Friday, and you're having some good time, there are those who will purchase drinks from reusable glass bottles, for example, and there are those who will purchase things from plastic bottles because it looks cool to carry those party cups with you wherever you go. I would think that you can make conscious choices and say, I am not going to use this plastic because it's going to lead to pollution. When it comes to farm inputs as well, you have a role, for example, if you are the head of the family, to ensure that there is no food waste in your house, and you purchase that which you only need.
Thank you so much, Mr. David Munene. I just want you to summarize what you have just said and what is your key takeaway for our dear listeners and viewers, and also how can we find you?
So I want to begin by thanking you all very much for listening and watching this. I hope it's very helpful to all of us. Now, the summary is men have a greater role in reversing the effects of environmental degradation by becoming the first champions in conservation. The effects on men are also as significant sometimes as they are on women, because if you lose your place as a man in terms of providing shelter, for example, because a hurricane struck your house, then it's demeaning on you. But you can take action to also empower women, your daughters, your wives, your spouses, your sisters around you, so that then you can journey with them towards conservation. I work at the Catholic Youth Network for Environmental Sustainability in Africa, CYNESA, CYNESA. And you can find CYNESA on Facebook at CYNESA, Twitter at CYNESA. On Instagram, we are cynes.africa. You can also write to us at info@cynesa.org. My name on Facebook is David N. Munene, and you can always find me on Twitter at Dave Munene. Thank you very much.